Welcome to EB5 Investment Voice, where attorney insights intersects with immigration investments. If you are a foreign investor, domestic fund manager, or enterprising entrepreneur and want to get the most out of the EB5 program, you have come to the right place. I'm Mark Deal, and I'll be your co-host on this journey. I'm joined by your host, Mona Shaw, and other attorneys at Mona Shaw & Associates, as well as immigration leaders from around the world. So let's get into EB5 Investment Voice. Mona, Rebecca, what is up with this title? Sue the Bastards?
Mark, there's outrage in the industry. Actually, this was not a title that we coined. It was a title that was put out by ILW, who is talking for the industry at this moment.
It sounds like a rally cry now. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't been on for a couple of weeks because we've been doing conferences and we've been trying to deal with a host of issues which has happened. But a couple of weeks ago, USCIS dropped a bombshell on the industry.
Yeah, it was in the middle of actually our IIUSA Public Policy Committee meeting. You know, in good old Florida, we're sitting sunshine and all of this, and then bad news comes through. And USCIS repealed all the regional centers. So at this point, as we speak, there are no regional centers. So no I-526 can be filed under the regional center program at this time.
All right, I got to ask you got that update in the room. There were several other EB5 stakeholders in the room with you. Did other people get the same update? Did you look up and look at each other? What happened? What was the feeling in the room?
Well, Mark, I can just tell you incredulity was the word. I could say, first of all. And then the second word that everybody came out with, let's sue them. Litigation.
Oh, hence the title. Got it.
Well, no, the word sue the bastards is a little heavy. I get it. But there's reasoning behind this. USCIS is not, and it's not in my opinion, it's not just my opinion. I think across the industry, they were not in a situation, they were not ready to just come out with an announcement that all regional centers needed to be recertified and the recertification has to be approved before any new 526 could be, could be put in. Filed.
Yeah. So I think there too, Mark, as we were in the room, you know, the concern with everyone was, okay, how long, one, are they going to take to provide this form? Now we know. They said May 14th. And two, how long are they going to take to adjudicate a regional center application? Now, you know, if you could come out with 30 to 60 days, great. But are they going to take 2 years like they've done with these previous forms?
Right. And we have a lot to go by because, for example, a work authorization takes approximately 6 minutes to approve. And yet we are so behind in work authorizations. And then there was another, I would say, part of the bombshell. We had a listening session, and more about the listening session in a minute. But within that listening session, Ms. Jadoo, the newly appointed director of USCIS, declared that USCIS currently has 4,000 recently vacated positions. 4,000.
Yeah.
So that means they have to recruit 4,000 people, train them, get them up to speed. And this is going to be in the next, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Yeah. It's just not possible.
Meanwhile, all the regional centers that were operating business as usual 2 weeks ago, now all of them, not just a significant portion, but all of them can no longer process 526 or them authorized until they're reauthorized.
Well, if you remember, Mark, the regional center program had lapsed. So they were coming in thinking, hey, we're coming back into business. We're going to get things done right away. And no, it's like you have to get recertified. Even though these regional centers have filed previous I-924As, kept up with their certification in the past, everyone has to go through this new process. And it's a whole new form. It's called so now it's this outrage on, is it going to be an extensive form? How much information do we have to provide? Are we filing a whole new application? Or is it going to be a one-pager? I mean, us as part of the IIUSA Public Policy Committee, we had suggestions out there on how we would like to see the form done. They had other groups who were sending out other samples of how it should be done.
Right, with the benefit going to regional centers who had stayed compliant, who had filed the 924s and paid all the fees, and who had already been approved. Now, if everybody's put into the same bucket, it's going to be horrendous. So that was one of the problems. But then there's a lot of practical problems. There's a lot of projects which were stopped midway when the regional center lapsed. It really took a lot of people by surprise that it was going to be for so long. So they're still raising capital. Or their projects are at a 829 stage. And now they decide, with all of this that's going on and the increased amount and the fact that the USCIS is, rather the new legislation's demanding 20,000 as just a filing fee, or for whatever reason, they do not want to be recertified. What happens to that project? How a lot of regional centers are just the only way, or the only person, the only entity rather, between the investors and the job creating entity in the project itself. And if they just fall back and are just suddenly now not there, what happens to the investors? What happens to the projects? So there's a lot there going on that USCIS has not thought through. Or maybe they have. Maybe we're wrong. But at this point, it looks like they haven't thought this through. And what is going, there's other issues. There's redeployment. There's just a ton of things.
And I think, Mona, as you say, I like you. It's the fact of practicality, right? One, it's a business, right? So how do you move forward? What do? You can't just leave people with no options or waiting for X amount of time before they could even move forward with a project that was underway. The other is the immigration side of it. You have these investors, like you said, who've been waiting for so long. Now they're saying, you don't have to recertify if you don't want to, right? And I think that's the point you were getting to earlier, is that, well, the regional center is what is the liaison with the investor. And so what happens if a regional center doesn't want to reauthorize? The case is still ongoing. USCIS will still approve, but what happens if their I-29 comes up and there's no regional center to get the documents done?
Right. Well, because what happens, Mark, people don't realize EB-5 is not a small process, a short process. It's a long, ongoing process between the regional center, the lawyers, and the project. And very often, the regional center themselves will be the liaison. In our projects, the ones that we often work with, we are the liaison, and we don't really have a third party. But that isn't the normal state of affairs. Normally, regional centers will be the people who go back to the project, make sure the project are doing what they're supposed to do. Are they creating the jobs the way they are? Are they spending the money the way they're supposed to? To be very fair to Congress have decided to put all of these things, to put fund managers and oversight, but that will take time to put together. So the consensus view was that, yes, this is a great idea, but we need to bring it in 2023. 2022 was not fair. And the very fact that you've stopped the business for everybody at this stage is not fair. And it's also detrimental not only to the program, not only to the investors, but also just to USCIS's credibility themselves.
Yeah, I think it's important for our listeners to know that this is the process now. Starting May 14th, they're cutting out with this new form, I-956, which you have to file, and it has to be approved, like we said earlier, before you can file petitions. But even before then, once you get that approval, you have to then file what we used to call an exemplar petition. So you have to file that in advance as well, and then receive the receipt notice before you can file your I-526 petition.
Right. And the important thing also to remember is that this legislation does not repeal the original INA, the IMAC 1990. It just is addition to that. So yes, there are some clauses which are repealed and completely changed, but the EB-5 program is still there. It's not like suddenly the EB-5 program has disappeared and just relies on this totally. And I believe that is the basis for my reading of the lawsuit, which was filed almost as soon as, I think, the 2 days after this whole thing came out. And again,
I was going to ask you about that.
Well, again, it was Bering, all Bering and who are represented by Laura from Greenberg-Traurig. So this is the Bering Regional Center versus Mayorkas, and the judge is actually Vince Chabria. The case was filed, April 22nd? And the most recent, well, we always check up before we come on to these podcasts and what's going on. And the most recent update in that case was actually just this week, May 4th, whereby the government filed an opposition or a response to the actual law center suit. So it's going to go on, and it's going to take some time. I'm wondering whether or not there is going to be an injunction, and then the injunction is going to be heard soon. We haven't heard much other than that there's a motion for a temporary restraining order and there's a response to that.
Mm-hmm. So we'll keep everyone updated, continue listening. But I think, Mona, it's interesting. I'm hearing two sides of this. Was it too soon? Or do you think this is great? Like, let's file it and see what happens. I mean, we had great success. They were able to bring it down to 500,000, their last lawsuit, which was good for the few days that we had before the regional center labs. But what do you think about this one?
I do think that it's going to force USCIS to think about issues that they obviously do not consider, because USCIS is a body for immigration. They're not business related. And again, oh gosh, Mark, I don't know how many times we have been screaming about this, that the project part of EB5 should be with a different body. And I think this really, again, goes to prove it. But with the USCIS controlling this as it is, they're actually stemming the flow of billions of dollars coming into this country and perhaps future money coming in as well. So I do think that a lawsuit, I'm not litigious. I don't always advocate for lawsuits, but I think they're right. I think USCIS did need to be sort of told, and I'm sure USCIS were ready for it as well. They know that this is the most litigious of all areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. But saying that, reading all the blog pieces which came out over the last couple of weeks, and good old Sam O'Dani has written quite a considerable amount of this. He was quite scathing about the listening session, the so-called listening session that we had. We were all excited about with USCIS.
Yeah, well, I think what happened, we were all excited about this listening session, thinking it was going to be something great. And then they come out with answers and questions literally, half an hour before it. So people came on thinking USCIS is going to give us all these updates when they're like, go onto our website. And then not only that, it's a listening session. So that we had, they couldn't answer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then this is why I do actually think that Sam is hitting on something, because if he relays in his blog piece, why is USCIS holding a listening session in the first place? If they really wanted to listen, they would have held a listening session at the beginning of the 60 days, not just when they've updated their website.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Sam stated that the Administrative Procedure Act requires that the USCIS, before they implement legislation, that they solicit input from the stakeholders. And this was a great way to listen to everybody. They can vent their frustration, as people did, and they can go, yep, right, we've noted your comment. We're not taking any notice of your comment. We've just noted your comment. Is USCIS deaf? And it seems actually that they are.
Yeah, it seems that everything has fallen on deaf ears, but I commend the industry. There was a lot of frustrations. I mean, what was great too is investors came on too and expressed their concerns, which I thought was great. So we say it's fallen on deaf ears, but let's hope not. We're trying to be optimistic.
Well, I agree. And Rebecca, and really the level of optimism, again, I'm being a little cynical here, does remain with the fact that USCIS makes a lot of money from EB5 out of all of their areas of immigration. You know, EB5 is a cash cow for them.
Yeah, and their track record is not that great. So, again, trying to be optimistic, but what can we expect to see in the future? And now you're putting in this integrity fund, which is great. And they said it in the stakeholder meeting, they're putting this in so that they can hopefully get faster processing times, but we've seen it. It brings in the most money, and we haven't seen anything worthwhile in the past few years. So I really do hope that this helps.
I hope it helps too, but it's frustrating.
So you can feel the frustration that we are feeling too. But I can say that it has been super, super busy. Not just that, because with our frustration, which is, the practitioners and regional centers, etc., investors are now expecting that the regional center program is up and operational. Is everything there going normal? And are we getting approvals? Rebecca, what's happening? What's happening with USCIS? Are they now working on people's?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have seen some movement. We had an approval recently, which is good. Where I think we've seen more of the movement is within the Department of State with the consular processing. And then the other good part is, of course, with the concurrent filing. So to take that shortly. So they are looking at interviews are being scheduled at the consulate. So we have gotten quite a few interviews set. We know that USCIS is reviewing documents. They have sent out emails to kind of update everyone on their cases, where they're standing. So they are adjudicating whether you were in the regional center program and grandfathered in. They are reviewing all those cases now moving forward.
Just to make clear, Rebecca, you're talking about pre-2019 cases, right? We're not talking about any new cases.
No, so what would have been June 2021 cases. So even within the region, if you're in a regional center case that you filed before the lapse of the regional center, they're reviewing those cases as well.
Okay, so they're back to work on those cases. What about concurrent filing? Are they accepting concurrent filing now? Because I know there was a lot of hue and cry. A lot of people ran to be the first ones filing. And then a lot of cases were rejected. Petitions were rejected.
Yeah, so I'm glad we told our clients to kind of take it easy, because the industry saw a lot of rejections. There are some cases that are still pending where they haven't received any information. But now USCIS has put on the website, they have notice now that you can file concurrently for I-526. So in the past, when people were filing and jumping to file like the next day, the website still said that you had to be approved. So of course, USCIS had nothing set, a standard of what they were doing with these cases. So as of today, if you have a pending or approved I-526, there's a certain lockbox that you have to file to. And if you're filing concurrently with the I-526 petition, there's another lockbox you will file to. So at least that's, being handled in a better way now.
Okay. And is the address the same as the normal addresses, or has that changed?
So I would advise everyone to go into the instructions on where to file. So those that are approved or pending, depending on the state you're living, will determine which lockbox it will go to. So there's the Chicago lockbox, there's Dallas, and I think it's the Phoenix lockbox. Now, if you're filing the I-526 at the same time you're filing the I-45, so any of the new cases moving forward, I believe you'll be filing at the Dallas lockbox. So I do encourage everyone to go on the website to make sure you're filing at the right lockbox.
Okay. I have another question for you, Rebecca. The new rules in RIA, does it make any difference with regards to age out? If somebody has filed concurrent filing now, what happens to the child's age?
Well, here's what it is. It's the same rules as before. If your priority date is current, now you're able to file the I-45 now, then the child's age will be locked in. Unfortunately, if you're in backlog, like China, if your priority date is not current, you will not be able to file. So your child's age is going to continue to run. So it all depends on where you are. So every country besides China, you're able to concurrently file, and hoping things go well down the line and you continue to be current, your child's age will be locked in. What RIA did when it comes to age out as well is it helps to lock the age in if something happens to your I-526 petition. Let's say something fraudulent happens, you get denied, you're able to keep your child's age if you file a new I-526 petition within a year.
That wasn't there previously.
Yeah, that wasn't there previously. So some good things came out of that.
Right. And I think USCIS is going to have to come out with regulations sooner rather than later with regards to the impact on existing investors with regional centers who are being terminated or just not being recertified at all. Perhaps allowing them to be able to move their 829s and their petitions to other regional centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like we said before, the regional center was there to help liaison when it needed to. I think right now is if investors need to look towards the NCE and most times, right, it was the regional center that could have been the manager of the NCE. So they need to look to see who is the manager, who is the one taking care of the NCE to determine whether or not you can move forward. Because ultimately, the NCE, if you have to redeploy or do anything, that's going to be the most important entity moving forward.
Yeah, I know there's so many things to look at when it comes to the U.S. immigration. Mark, we often talk with lawyers from other jurisdictions. And obviously, we'll be interviewing many of these in our upcoming global series. Mm-hmm. But the thing that people find is that there's it's just so difficult. There are so many areas and sections in US immigration EB-5 in comparison to some golden visa application of Portugal or a Caribbean application.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny that you say that, Mona, because remember with these stakeholder meetings that we've been having, and we're part of all these attorney chats, everyone's like, it's going to be like the last time. It's going to take 2 to 3 years before we figure out what's actually happening, right? It took us 5 years alone to figure out what redeployment was and what you can do with redeployment. So looking at policy memorandum, how things are going to be interpreted, it's not just, like you said, with the other golden visas, purchasing a property, it's a business.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. And having a business is just so different. Rebecca, I have a couple of other questions and some other issues before we wrap up. Rural cases. Now, rural set-asides are allowed. They're a new thing in RIA. We've discussed this before. New visas, a completely new set of visas. What about those projects which are already set in rural areas or infrastructure projects? Do they benefit from having, the set-asides?
Unfortunately, no. I think we've talked this to death too with all the other attorneys, and it seems that the set-asides are for new cases moving forward under the new law. So it's not going to help anyone who filed in the past.
But for concurrent filing purposes,
yes.
It does help, though. If you're from a country like China, where you have the 15-year backlog and you file under a rural program under the new rules, you're okay.
Yeah. So there could be investors that file now under the rural or infrastructure who could get a visa or get a green card faster than those who filed 10 years ago.
But you can't file until the regional center program and the regional centers are certified. Yeah, unless it's a direct case.
Yeah. Yes, it's a bit of a mess. I know we're having fun with it, but it has been frustrating. RIA itself, you have to read each and every line carefully because you don't know which section has been grandfathered in, which section is going to be for the new cases coming in. So it's, the effective date really is different for each section.
Right. It's like playing a game of chess and they keep introducing new pieces with new special moves and you can't move 2 pieces at once, but sometimes you can if you're sitting on this side of the board.
I think that's a very good analogy, Mark, but I would say it's like having a red queen and a blue queen and a black queen wearing a veil all at the same time. That's what we're doing, you would hear. It's the same piece being transformed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it's great that they put these set-aside visas. People can come and get it. But eventually, again, it's going to get backlogged because this is what's going to happen. The first year, you have these set-aside visas. If they're not used, they will go back to set-asides again for the second year. And then after that, it will go for the entire pool. But there's so many cases still pending. So all of this is going to be a backlog. So they have to find, I think this is temporary. I mean, everyone can have their own opinion, but I think it's temporary in nature. And they're going to have to find something to get, more visas or take away the dependents because ultimately at the end of the day, it's only 10,000 still.
Well, it's still only 10,000, but Rebecca, we're having whispers of India also hitting a backlog. But so far, we're not seeing it, but the suggestions out there, Charlie had put out, but he's put this out before that there is going to be a backlog.
Yeah, he's put it out before. And I know Suzanne had done a blog piece too, and all our clients have called us for this saying that, oh my God, we're going into 10-year backlog. We've yet to see it.
So it sounds like there's certainly been exciting times in the last week. Now, exciting can be both positive and in this case, negative. But it sounds like we're going to find out a lot more here on EB5 Investment Voice. In fact, in the next week after the May 14th, when we find out about this form I-596 and we find out about how the industry is reacting to that form, strategies, and of course, suing the bastards. Right, Mona? Because that's what everyone is railing to do.
There's a great quote. I don't like to often read out on these podcasts, but I have to just quote this to you. I think this also came from Sam on one of the blog pieces I read. What Congress has joined, let no agency tear asunder. So And the reference is that what is USCIS doing? Do they even care how they're ruining the businesses for regional centers and the program itself? Because very seriously, if they don't put their act together and if they don't get this organized like now, or if a judge doesn't walk in and put an injunction to what they're doing, we may not have much of an industry left.
Oh, Mona, stop being such a pessimist. We've been through this plenty of times. And, we have our good days, we have our bad days, but we'll get through it and we always find a way. So program is still here. We're going to continue filing. I just encourage everyone to stay tuned to see what's new coming up.
Yes, you're right, Rebecca. Suing the bastards is a way of keeping an out-of-control agency in check.
And after all, that's what you do. Thank you for being with us today on EB5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shaw and Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's mshawlaw.com. Make sure you don't miss our next episode focusing on a different aspect of the EB5 program by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB5 Investment Voice.